Welcome to Playing with Fire, the podcast for people who are ready to custom build their love.
We're talking about non-monogamy, however you design it, as an individuation opportunity.
Want to leave the default and make your life spectacularly you? You're in the right place. We have a guest today that I am personally beyond excited about, like unreasonably excited. So before we jump in, I'm going to introduce our guest formally, and then maybe I'll stop fangirling.
It's very exciting. I'm very excited.
Alex Alberto, pronouns are they, them, is a queer and polyamorous storyteller and educator. They grew up in Montreal and currently live in upstate New York, where it is just gorgeous. Alex is the author of the genre-blending memoir Entwined, essays on polyamory and creating home, which blew my mind. It was just absolutely outstanding. So I know you're tempted right now to click the button and go get it. Just hang on. We'll have the link for you. You're absolutely going to want to read this. Alex co-founded Quilted Press, a collective of independent authors who reshape traditional narratives of love, family, and identity. That's good work. That's good work. You can connect with Alex on Instagram and TikTok at @AlexAlberto. And you can learn more about their work at alexalberto.com. And right now, we're going to just dive in and have a little conversation about Entwined. So thank you, Alex. Thanks for being here.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for such a warm introduction.
Well, I really am super excited to be talking to you because I've read a lot of non-monogamy. I've read a lot of the nonfiction. I've read a lot of the scholarly work, and I've read a lot of memoirs. And I have rarely felt myself reflected anywhere. And I think I'd gotten through the first essay, and I was just, I'm like, Ken, we have to talk to this person. We have to talk to this person.
Yeah, you were right.
Yeah. So thank you so much for writing it. I'm just deeply grateful.
It really is my pleasure. I love hearing reactions like that from readers. I don't know if it'll ever get old. I don't think so. Because, yeah, I wrote this book. I wanted to feel this way, right? 10 years ago. And I couldn't. And that's why I started writing. So for me, just seeing it hit home in any kind of way, it doesn't have to be life-changing, but even if it's little bits, it truly warms my heart and keeps me going. So thank you for sharing.
Well, it hit home. Absolutely.
Yeah. And, before we dive into, we've got a bunch of questions about the book, but I would love for you to just set up the audience a little bit and just give a teaser of your backstory. How do you come to find yourself and identify yourself in this wild world of non-monogamy?
Sure. So yeah, when I was early 20s, I was in a monogamous relationship and with a man, and having feelings for a coworker who was a woman, and asked for an open relationship, and the response I got was, well, you can sleep with women. And that's it.
Lovely.
And yeah, like a very traditional one penis policy start. And through that, I just realized, actually, for me, it's not, this won't work. I really need to be free. And I felt a great deal of pain. I was feeling broken. I was feeling like, why can't I want what everybody around me seems to want? But I never saw myself in a traditional trajectory relationship escalator type of relationship. And I knew I wanted to connect with multiple people. I just didn't know what that looked like. And I'm from Montreal, as you said, in the introduction. And then when I moved to New York City, I used that as an opportunity to just explore relationships, my queerness, my gender. I was kind of, anonymous for the first time outside of a small place where I was from. And then through that, found non-monogamy, went through many different iterations, and the book kind of goes through a little over 10 years of that journey of me, even though I was single or unpartnered. When I started diving into non-monogamy, I did eventually get a partner. And because of hierarchy and mononormativity. I did go through a period where we were in a hierarchical partnership and then did a bit more deconstruction of that. And it's still evolving today, but the book really kind of covers this 10 years. And what I really wanted to be able to show was what it looks like once you've passed the initial stages.
Yeah.
Because we grow up with these monogamous love stories and we know what to dream of. So when you enter a relationship, if you have challenges or if you don't know what you're doing, you kind of have this vision of what you're hoping for. But I didn't have that for
Yeah.
polyamory. I didn't even know the kinds of non-monogamy that could be accessible to me. And now I do. So I like to say that I wanted to push towards a more seasoned approach to polyamory in my book so that you could kind of see just the sort of joys. You know, there are challenges, but there are also a lot of joys accessible that we have no idea in the way that we're socialized.
I love what you said about knowing what to dream of.
Mm-hmm.
It is hard stepping outside of the mononormative culture. It's like I want to do something different. What's even possible? And I do. I love your narrative and the stories. They're, if nothing else, they're imagination expanders for us, and that
Yeah.
is such a lovely thing. It's a great gift.
It is. And there's something really different about hearing, we get the Disneyfied version of what happily ever after is. What I
Mm-hmm.
like is when any love story, even from a monogamous perspective, introduces us to the idea that there is no one way, there is no one path. And I appreciate that. Ken and I were talking about how this book felt so different because the focus here was on metamours. Like that
Mm-hmm.
is really it's so different. I think in all the other books that I've read, delightful as they may be, they're more of a romp in the hay. And there's that, which is lovely, but not necessarily the same vibe that you're going for. I feel like you kind of just answered this, but it's also a little scary, I think. Okay, yeah, I want to reframe this a little. When I see somebody writing their sexual like deconstruction and they're writing their memoir, their non-monogamy adventure from that like I'm going to find my sexual self. We kind of know that story to a degree. And there
We
are a lot
do.
of ways that can go. But to write it and to include the interactions and the tenderness of what it is to have a metamour, a partner of your partners who you are not directly connected to, especially, that is I, almost unheard of.
Hmm. Yeah.
I can't even think of any other good examples. What got you there? How did you even take the step to include that, to center that?
Yeah, I think so. I often say that for me, metamours are the best part of polyamory. And what you're raising, I think it the fact that a lot of stories center sexual exploration, I think it's great. I think we live in a culture where that has been repressed, that is not encouraged, and depending on the gender you've been assigned at birth, the culture that you grew up with, it's actually very important sexual exploration. But that was just like a tiny sliver of my own experience with polyamory. And I think the issue is that we're so starved for non-monogamous and polyamorous narratives that we just need so many more. And right now, the one that is kind of the most represented and the loudest is this very specific approach, which is often centered around a primary couple who does everything the same, you know, socially and logistically, and then they have um, other secondary partners, and they often draw this kind of, even though there are feelings and commitments, it's kind of more sex based. Um, and for me, when everything clicked in my polyamory is when I started building a relationship with my very first metamour, Bridget. And it was at a time when I had moved to New York City. I think I'd been there for 2 years. And it was surprisingly hard for me to make friends as an
Mm,
adult who was out of school and in a there's something about New York City. I think people are just really busy. They live far away from each other. And people wanted to make time for me if it was to date or to fuck, or if it was a networking thing for work. But then if it was just like, hey, no, I'm looking, not just an acquaintance, I'm looking for an intimate friend, someone who's going to be there, someone that I'm going to share fears and emotions with, and I don't know, have over for dinner and movie nights. And I had such a hard time finding that
Yeah.
until I met Bridget. And because we were both dating the same person and we wanted to approach non-monogamy in a way where it was more of a kitchen table style, where kind of everybody hangs out with one another and gets to know one another. And we really clicked. I really, really liked her. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh, like she's a new part of my family now in a way that I hadn't even thought could exist. Like
Yeah.
this is something that's even very hard to describe because it's not represented enough, but just a type of unique intimacy and care that you can have for a metamour when you're both romantically involved with the same person. You care for that human in a romantic way. There's just something really powerful. And then from then on, that's when for me everything shifted. This scarcity mindset, jealousy, I basically started to focus on, okay, what can it bring to my life when my partner dates someone else? Not just, I'm happy to see my partner happy.
Yeah.
This sort of, it's a different level of compersion, if you will.
Well, I think you're recentering it's your joy for their
Mm-hmm.
joy. It's yours, but it's independent of whether like you don't even have to really know about their joy, like their individual little joys.
Mm-hmm.
It does transcend. But you know what? You're also reminding me of a time in my life when I did find it relatively easy to make those kind of chosen family
Mm-hmm.
friendships was when I had little kids.
Yeah.
I was homeschooling my little kids and I had 7 of them, so it was just wild, and they were like, and it was easy to pull people in and then to fully commit this like attitude of caring toward them, toward their children and toward them as individuals. And now that my children are older, the baby's 17, he's no baby anymore. That I've felt it ebb away over the last decade. I've felt that shift of, oh, yeah, we don't culturally have a script for how do we really be close. So when we were all in crisis mode because we all had little kids, we broke some of the monoland rules. But
Mm-hmm.
once we could put it back in the box, I it's uncomfortable, but we did. And it's letting me know that there is a way that I practiced the same moves of polyamory before I was ever thinking about the word polyamory or thinking about sex and any of this having anything to do with each other.
I see
Yes.
a
And
lot of. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yes, and I really love that because basically what you had was kind of a shared purpose
Mm. Hmm.
where your kids needed to grow, to be taken care of, to learn. And around that shared purpose, it created intimacy and bonding. And it's kind of the same with metamours and polyamory. You do have a shared purpose of caring for that human. And depending on how you do it, building family together. But it's not specific to polyamory. And I do get that feedback from my book a lot. People who feel happy in monogamy don't want to question that, but they do start questioning the way they build family and relationships and community and the way they have been centering romance exclusively.
Yeah.
And also questioning platonic romance or, very intimate friendships. Getting back to what we were saying about there's actually very little sex in my book. So
Yeah.
it just puts everything back into perspective.
Mm. Mm. We use that word romance, right, to protect us from a lot of things. I hear people do it all the time. They're like, well, this is my friend, but we're not romantic. As if that word somehow answers a whole bunch of questions. But I really challenge that. I'm like, I am very romantic with my close friends.
Mm-hmm.
It's not sexual. Most of the time because they're straight women. That's a frequent reason, or because they're monogamous. But super romantic in all the ways that I experience. Like, I don't know how I would sort out the activities outside of kissing and having sex. Like all the rest of them, bringing flowers, scheduling meaningful dates,
Yeah.
all like, sharing memes, right? Like all of that stuff is the same. And so is that what you're talking about? I think that idea of the poly lens, like viewing the world, you talked about viewing the world through the poly lens or the polyamorous
Yeah.
lens.
That's kind of exactly it, where it's like for me, it started where I was so focused on, okay, I'm going to be building romantic and or sexual relationships with multiple people. And that's what polyamory is about. But then just a couple of years into my journey, I kind of realized, oh no, actually for me, polyamory is a way to build family. So already kind of goes beyond romance and sex. And then the more I got comfortable and deep into polyamory, especially as I did more work deprogramming hierarchy, then I realized, oh, now I'm looking at everything very differently. I'm looking at friendships, I'm looking at working relationships, co-living relationships, kind of just all these systems that we have in place from kind of a relationship anarchist perspective, basically, where trying to start from a blank slate and see what are the needs that all the individuals included have and like what does want to happen naturally. And I don't know that I would have done some of my artistic projects in the same way had it not been for polyamory.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does to me. Yeah.
Yeah, Ken was doing polyamory way before he knew the word. Um, and so that describes to me, Ken, how you like you would explain things about relationship to me in a way that I was more deeply entrenched in monogamy when we first became romantic, and so like we had a paradigm. We had like grit in the gears of our paradigms because he had a lot of that already built in.
And it makes, I think, so what I hear in the question that you asked, Jolie, is that it gave you a different lens to look at your past through. Is that how you experience it? Like you look back and see
Yeah, for me, it's
different,
not just the design of the future, but also
yeah.
looking back and going, oh, this was me all along. I didn't have the words. And so I also did it badly before I did it well. I've been out as polyamorous for 15 years. And I like the first 7, I'm like, oh, that is just a train wreck, just a train wreck. But when I look back actually before the official polyamory, I see a lot of really wholesome polyamory happening that just wasn't sexual. Like a lot of it. And I don't know, it lightens my view of everything that came before. Sometimes I hear people talk about like, oh, I feel like I wasn't alive before, or I wasn't living my truth before. I'm like, oh, actually, I can see how if I just turn a polyamorous lens on it, no, I was. I just didn't know how to be out and how to be conscious about it, but I was doing it.
Yeah, that is so interesting because I don't think I've spent as much time looking at my past before I even thought about, open relationships and non-monogamy. And I love that approach of also looking at the past. I do that sometimes with older movies or just any movie that I'm like, this isn't about polyamory, but like it kind of is.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I'm
Oh, and
like,
if
you could change like 3 lines of dialogue and then it would be a poly movie.
we were just watching an episode of Frankie and Grace on Netflix, Grace and Frankie on Netflix, and we
Yeah.
were like, "This is just polyamory. They just need to decide not to care about the monog. Like that's it. You change that one thing, completely fixed. There are
Yep.
no divorces required. Just have fun." Isn't that the truth of almost every romantic comedy? Anything like,
Oh,
can we just like take like that out? Can
Oh,
we do
yeah, and
surgery on it?
that's why I have this essay in my book where I just wanted to look at sort of classic blockbuster movies and be like, okay, what could have happened if these were non-monogamous movies? Because the same tropes come back over and over again, the love triangle, the fear of commitments, I think I added the jaded lover's revenge for those like thriller, like
Yeah.
sexy thriller movies. And it's just sometimes it's frustrating. Like my whole polycule, we kind of want to just like throw a shoe at the TV or something. Like,
Yeah, right.
like the
Totally.
movie would be over in 5 minutes.
Yep. Throwing
There's
popcorn
no
at the
plot
TV.
left.
And it's like,
Yeah.
and
Well,
yeah,
as a jealousy researcher, I mean, one of the primary things that turned up when I was doing my it was a depth psychological search on jealousy. So I'm going all the way back to mythological sources, and I'm like, oh, we'd have no plots. We need, I think, basically, we evolved jealousy as far as I can tell. I know there's lots of like good ideas around, attachment needs, but basically, we needed a plot device.
so
We
we
just
had
needed a
boring
plot.
stories, so we invented jealousy.
It's as good a reason as any. We talk, Playing with Fire is titled Playing with Fire because a lot of what we do can be tricky, verging on potentially feeling a little scary / even damaging. But the subtitle of our podcast is Individuation and Non-Monogamy. And so we talk a lot about consciously designing individuation-oriented relationships. And when I was reading Entwined, I think I actually dropped the book when I was like, finally, I'm finally reading an actual person, not a made up story, but an actual person talk about not just learning to differentiate themselves. Because yeah, we gotta go find our path. But individuation is about really consciously becoming more and more yourself over time. And it never ends, it never finishes, and it requires differentiation, but that's not sufficient. We have to also be willing to like continually do the deeper layers of work. And so I saw that reflected, and I'm just so curious. What I saw was someone who appeared to be intentionally crafting what I think of as a psychologically engaged life. I don't know whether you think of your life that way, so I don't want to place that label on you. But I think you're exemplifying in Entwined how that can look, the reflection necessary. And I'm just curious, did you set out to have polyamory be a path of self-discovery, or were you already on a path of self-discovery and the polyamory just kind of entered the picture?
That's a really good question, and that's a high compliment. Thank you. I've never heard this term before. Psychological. Wait, repeat it.
So I think of a psychologically engaged life.
Psychologically engaged life. Yeah, it's really well said. And now that you're saying it, yeah, I do feel like that's the case. I think polyamory was maybe the first big experiment or self-discovery path that I went on. And I think it helped me kind of chip away at these boxes that I had put myself in. So I do think it was a little bit, maybe it was both like a vehicle and perhaps the fuel to continue the self-discovery. And because polyamory allowed me to openly and without guilt and intentionally build multiple relationships at the same time, I think it also helped me discover other aspects of myself that perhaps were pulled at more with one partner instead of another. You know how we all have different kinds of intimacy and different parts of ourselves that get, not that I was necessarily hiding parts of myself to some partners, but they get lit up, I guess, a little easier with certain partners, or maybe some partner might wake up something. And then, so for me, there was definitely my pansexuality that was a part of that has always been, it had been something that I had questioned from a very, very early age. But I think that polyamory definitely gave me a framework where I could perhaps experience it more on a day-to-day life without feeling like, I don't know, am I straight? Am I gay? I don't know. Do I, and I just kind of set it aside and just see what happens with the people that I connect with. And then my gender queerness was a really big one. And I think that it is in a way a muscle, self-discovery and searching. And because it also requires I mean, a lot of deep excavation, but also um, letting go of a lot of things that society has instilled in you, and that's really hard. So once I had done it for one or two frameworks, then it became easier to question other things and then try to let these sides of myself breathe. And same with relationships. Like a lot of that is co-designing, you
Mm.
know, co-designing with a person in a dyad, and then at the same time at the system level, which, in my book, I did in various forms. I had triad experiences. Um I was a hinge partner where I was part of a polycule. There was discussions of moving in at some point, three of us together, and we did live together for a time. And now, beyond the book, I'm also in the process of moving in with my metamour and her kids, and talking about co-parenting and really working hard at reading parenting books and crafting our parenting philosophy and our co-parenting plan. So you're right, it kind of never stops.
Yeah. I Ken, it's reminding me of the conversations you and I would have about how simple. I have a bad habit of apologizing to Ken for messing up his life. I mean, it's a bad habit. I will own that. It's a bad habit. I do it because his life made sense um, from that outsider perspective. Like, it was neat, it was organized, and even though he was open, none of that seemed to play out. Like, there was no drama anywhere that anybody could see, and it was all very, I don't know, like he
It
had
made
gardens that were weeded.
it
I
made
had a jungle
sense.
in my
Yeah.
backyard. It was literally just chaos over here.
It made sense the way the toddler toy that has the little holes, and you put
Yeah,
the right
yeah.
shaped block into the right shaped hole. It was organized. It made sense like that made sense.
Yeah, but what Alex is sharing is reminding me how, like, Ken often, well, he'll kindly pause me and say, "Please don't apologize for making my life complicated because it was
Mm.
boring and I wasn't growing." Like, and
Exactly.
I still struggle with that, but I hear what you're describing and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, the juicy stuff of like
Yeah.
figuring out how to co-parent together or figuring out whether you want to live together or whether you intentionally want to not live with a partner that you've been living with
Mhm.
for a long time." Like,
And
these are questions that
there's the
blow me out.
word that was on my mind when you were describing that, is the intention.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Intentionally, like we're gonna read books, and we're going to plan how we're going to do this, and we're going to um I mean, because you're people, you'll disagree and you'll agree and you'll figure stuff out, and like that's the joy of life from my point of view, is the how we all interrelate like that, and you're doing it on purpose rather than just stumbling along, the way I had, and the way that sense making life was. It was just, no, I'll just go along until something happens to me. I
Mhm.
love the picture that you've painted of intentionally doing things. It's just great.
Polyamory seems to invite an intentionality. So when I'm hearing you, Alex, use the phrase polyamorous lens, I'm thinking we could also say it's an intentional lens, because polyamory isn't about how many people you're sleeping with or how many people you're partnered with, but it's about an intentionality of your relationships. And that's threaded through the whole thing, especially the way the book ends. I can just see the like, oh, we're all just left. I mean, I closed it and I was like, now
Yeah.
I don't know what happens.
Yeah.
Like,
Totally.
what happens? Because there is no, like, I don't actually want to. Like, it was both painful and perfect to not get to know, because you're still here, thankfully, being a person, individuating, growing. And I love that. Um, Memoirs often give us like, there's like this neat finish.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's a
Yeah.
spoiler to say Alex is alive and
So
therefore gets to have a continuation. It's
and
beautiful.
and that
Yeah. And
well, I wanted to so in that, from that, there you are, working, growing, making plans, things are happening. Do you ever struggle with you or your partners changing over time?
sometimes momentarily, I think I think where I struggled the most was the fear of me changing and how that might affect other people. So like for me, a big thing with my partner that I've been with the longest, Dawn, in the book, we've now been together 9 years. And for me, I called it opening the gender box, this sort of box that I had left tightly shut inside of me that I didn't really want to look at. And he was one of the first ones to kind of very gently be like, I forget how he did it, but because he knows me, he was able to kind of know that there was something regarding gender in me, and he wanted to signal that whenever I was ready, he would be really happy to see me, start looking at that. But something that I was very scared was, well, what does it mean for our relationship? Because you've known me for a long time before, when I identified as a woman, when, if anything, I was really shoving myself into that woman box because I had always felt like I wasn't a real woman or I needed to, so it,
Overperforming, maybe.
yeah, exactly. But my partner's changing for some reason. It's almost, perhaps, as you were describing, Ken, kind of the joy of life. It's something that typically makes me very happy, in the same way that Dawn really encouraged me before I perhaps even realized myself that I really could and should look at the way gender was just so constraining for me. I like to do that for my other partners. And there's kind of this attitude of really wanting to cheer each other on and to be flexible. And I think that's partly why I never felt like, before finding happiness and balance in polyamory, I just, in my head, I was like, oh, I'll just have a series of relationships that last a few years. Like every few years, I'm going to need something different. And the idea, even just like having been with one person for 9 years, that was just completely foreign to me before. And now it's almost exciting to look at the different seasons that each of us individually have had and the different seasons that we have had together. Um, but I want to quickly go back to the ending that you brought up, the ending of the book that is not neatly tied, where we don't really know what happened. Because when I started writing the book, I was living with two of my partners, and we had this long-term, vision of building a family together and a home. And I thought that's how the book would end when I started writing it. And then, yeah, I don't know that it's a spoiler necessarily because it's life, but then that relationship, I like to say that the relationship transitioned into something else instead of ending. We are still very, very close. Ali edited my entire book. She's also a writer. She's working on a memoir, Ali Tadros. She has a Substack. Check it out. And I'm not saying that the transition wasn't, challenging at times or hurtful, but we did want to remain in each other's lives. And now we're just not having this kind of relationship where we are romantically involved and building a co-living life together. And I was so worried that it would make my book incomplete. And I was trying to figure out, what other ending can I find? And that's why I ended up I play with form in the book. So each essay is kind of in a different form. And I was like, let me list questions that I ask myself because that's also something that we all do. We ask ourselves questions and we don't have the answers, and we can kind of just reflect on that. And now that the book has been out, even just 1 year ago, I had no idea that I would now be building this family that includes kids. And it's just, then I wonder, what don't I know now that's going to happen in 2 years from now? And it's kind of exciting. Relationships that end, I don't think we should see them as failure. And that's another polyamorous lens. It's not because in monogamy land, it's like, if it's not forever until you die, then it's a failure. Like it didn't work out. We often say it didn't work out.
Yeah.
But no, like we learn from each relationship and it sends us to the next season. And it's also an opportunity for growth for everybody.
Right. It's also a beautiful opportunity to experience endings. Like things can end. And I mean, I don't know. A lot of the pain I see in my office is a lack of capacity to hold endings, to allow things to transition. I struggle with transition myself, as well as a lack of ability to hold all the immense amount of joy that we can experience when we are having lots of loving people in our lives. Like it can be actually challenging to my whole like life concept to just be with that level of joy. I heard Kate Laurie talking about joy, positive affect tolerance, and I was like, oh yeah. Yeah, we have to up
Mm-hmm.
that in order to
Mm-hmm.
tolerate happy polyamory. Otherwise, we find ourselves creating drama or
Mm-hmm.
change just for the sake of like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. Why are you uncomfortable? I'm too happy. Well, that's unfortunate. And that sounds
Yeah.
like a total Jolie thing. Like that definitely sounds like a me thing. So I'll claim that myself.
No, I feel like I know people who experience that a lot. Like not necessarily like I'm uncomfortable because I'm too happy, but perhaps always looking out
Yeah.
for what's the next drama or what's the next thing. And
Mhm.
sometimes I do that, not that I'm not happy, but I'm a fixer.
Mhm.
So I'll be like, okay, what is the next little thing that we could optimize or that we could tweak or that we could, big or small. And there is value in also just sitting in the joy and sitting in like the stage that you're at.
Yeah. I mean, talk about stages. Being at a stage where you're now, moving into a parenting dynamic, like like that's a huge game changer. When Ken and I combined households, we went from households that looked normie on the outside to having 7 children and 5 cats and 14 chickens. And 3 adults. People did not understand. And it's beautiful to just sit in that. I wish I had taken more time to just be in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is one of the ways I think that the world has gotten a little bit softer. There are more stories like yours
Mm-hmm.
to help us realize we're not alone. Because I was panicked a lot of the time because I felt alone. I felt like nobody else had ever gone through that. And people who are possibly well-meaning will say alongside that never works or it's a failure if it doesn't last forever. They'll also say things like, well, you shouldn't have to work at it too hard. It shouldn't be it shouldn't be this complicated. Make it simpler. But I'm loving that you clearly embrace the complexity of allowing this change to happen in your life without forcing it.
Yeah, I do hear that a lot too. Like, oh, it sounds so nice in theory. Not necessarily just the becoming a co-parent, but just in general, like polyamory. Like, oh, like I struggle with one relationship. Like, how could I manage multiple relationships? Like, it sounds good in theory, but it seems like so much work. And my response is often, I feel like I would say that to people who had kids just to make it more normalized. Like, oh, kids sound great in theory, but like it looks like a lot of work. Like, yeah, even if you have just 2 kids, I think it is a lot of work. I cannot imagine 7.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, after 3, you're just like you have your plan. It's good. It's all
Yeah.
fine.
um and and I think again it makes me think of what you said, Ken, about the joy of the labor of it, even just the joy of the
Mm.
process and the joy of the day to day. And I think monogamous relationships are also hard work. I think nuclear families are really hard work. It's just that people are used to seeing that hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can get validated for it
Exactly. Yeah, if
versus
you have
demonized. Like if it's a lot of work, something's wrong with our polyamorous relationships. But if something's not going well in your monogamous relationship and you're dedicating yourself to addressing that, you're seen as a hero. You're
yeah,
upholding the status quo and you're a hero.
yeah, and it's why stories are so important
Yes.
because there are so many, I don't know, tropes of daily, marriage in those stories, which is usually a heterosexual, cis marriage. And there will be, I don't know, arguments about house chores or about one spending too much time with their friends and things like that. And people see those and they have an idea of how to tackle them. They have an idea that it's normal. And if they tell a friend about it, that friend will have thoughts about it. Whereas when you haven't been exposed to anything else, then people just don't even know what to answer. And that's why I think how-to books are incredibly important. But for me, I just wanted story. I didn't want to really be told like how to do it. I mean, I did read some that were helpful, but I think people lose themselves in stories way more. And I think storytelling is just so powerful to create empathy and to also help people understand themselves and each other. And yeah, like I specifically did not want to write any kind of how to, not give any kind of advice, just say, here's one person's story. And it's a perspective that sadly I haven't seen enough. And there are many other perspectives that are not mine that also haven't been seen enough in non-monogamy and polyamory. We're kind of barely scratching the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I am very grateful for your stories because I agree with you. The stories they get out there where people can see them, and now those people can relate to each other around stories like this. And it becomes easier to walk through the world and say polyamory without people being, what is that? They can just be
Mhm.
like, okay, I know a little bit about that, which alleviates some of the fear that um, that causes some of the division
Yeah.
between, like, okay, so I'm monogamous, and I know I'm monogamous, but that person's polyamorous, so I don't know enough about it, and now I'm scared, so I just won't relate. The more stories we have, the more bridges we have.
Well, I immediately put Entwined on my list of books for monogamous people.
Mm.
Because I often will work with people who really aren't sure. They're at a paradigm shifting moment. They're shifting to that polyamorous lens, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily know what they want, and they need imagination stretchers, and they also need a story that helps them show self-compassion. Like, you show
Mm.
immense self-compassion for your process, for your unfolding, and that in itself is a big deal. To model that is remarkable. And then I think about, like, as like I imagine like a 25-year-old me or a 27-year-old me reading these stories going like, oh, I was an asshole in my 20s. Like, if I had an idea about how things were supposed to be, even if I didn't know anything about it, like, I would take too stalwart a position. I was too entrenched. And that's how I found safety. I was like, I will just know,
Mhm.
I will know things. And so reading these stories would have just made that space to, like, oh, I don't have to know. There are these people who are clearly happy doing this. And that's all I needed. Every time I heard a story from someone clearly happy, enjoying something I didn't know anything about, I broke down another part of that total asshole behavior of deciding that I needed to be the arbiter of whether they were doing right or doing wrong. And yeah, I just wish that had been out there. Cause like you said, how-to books are great. But I'm thinking, if I go back to 2009 me, I picked up The Ethical Slut, second edition. Not a
Mhm.
horrible book. Like, it has its purpose, but it didn't actually describe what I was looking for. It also gave me rules that were actually not helpful and got me in some hot water real fast.
Yeah.
And it didn't help me empathize with myself. It didn't help me empathize with the people I was trying to relate to. So I feel like for people who are in that mono to polyam, like, I don't know, but I'm in the discovery. This just is a beautiful way to introduce the ideas without being pedantic about, you got to do it this way. You have to follow these rules.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you noting the self-compassion. I don't know that I would have like realized that myself, just how present it is in the book. So that's really interesting to hear. And yeah, there's something about, I think, a story versus a how-to book that is also less um not triggering, but less, like it pokes at people less, because for a moment they're like, oh, this is not about me. This is
Yeah.
not about me wondering how I would handle that, or whether this rule or this framework would work, whether I want this, and maybe some of the overwhelm of like, how would I even start applying that? It's instead just somebody else's story, and they will still digest it. Like there is still, even though it's not a how-to book, I think it gives maybe just starting points or ideas, or it feeds the imagination and perhaps the questions to ask themselves, like we were saying. But it's less, I think it's less threatening for
Yeah.
people to just say, this is not about me right now, it's just me exposing myself to a story.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I,
mean, humans are storytelling creatures. It's what we do. It's
Mhm.
that's how we make meaning.
I the stories and reading your stories in particular, um, the how to books are like they feel like learning a language by reading about it
Mhm.
versus going to a city where everybody speaks the language. You know,
Yeah.
there's that
Different
organic,
experiences.
natural. I absorb it because it's happening around me, and I don't learn rules. I don't learn dogma. I just figure out how to make it work by watching everybody else do it. I love that way of learning,
And it's slower,
and it's slower. Well,
right? Because you have to
slower in
like,
some ways, but actually faster in others
right,
because you're in it. You're right
you're in it.
there.
Yeah. The immersive
That's
aspect.
Yeah, I love that comparison because I love languages. There's an essay in the book called Queer en Français, because French is my native language and it's such a gendered language. So just thinking about just my gender identity and living in English versus having to reconcile that in French was just such a mind fuck. But yeah, I just love languages in general. I think it's my brain likes learning languages, thinking about languages, and I had never thought about a story versus a how-to book in that lens. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. This is fun. It's a fun way to approach it.
Yeah. It's making me think too about the role of community.
Mhm.
I mean, Ken and I together run a community learning environment. Like that's what we do. The Year of Opening is a community. And so what I'm trying to do is give people that sense of, yes, here are tools, here are some how-to things that we can do, but also, yeah, we got to be in there with other people. And I'm loving this idea. So if you are a person who is not currently able to access, for any reason, not able to access community, one of the ways to at least addend your experience is to add story into it. And there aren't that many books that I can say, hey, this is a non-self-injurious memoir.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I
Yeah.
experienced it. I like many of them there are like big moments of self-injury and
Yeah.
self-damage, and
Yeah.
that's kind of like how they get that plot in there. And I
Mm-hmm.
know it has its place, but it worries me to hand that to somebody who's in a really vulnerable spot of paradigm shift, and they're like, "Wait, what's going to happen now?" When
Yeah.
that's not the only way. Sometimes it goes
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, no, that's true. And that's definitely like, yeah, there is challenges and growing pains and stuff like that in my book. But yeah, it's a happy book at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I do think that narratives of maybe more difficult journeys are really important. But again, if you don't have anything to balance it out with, then you're left thinking that that's the only path that you're going to have.
Right.
Um, yeah.
Okay, so it's officially on my official rec list for everyone is to go get the book, and also to introduce it. Like when you're in that white belt phase of non-monogamy, a lot of people will start coming out of the woodwork and be like, wait, you're doing what now? And some of them are curious, and you're not ready to teach. You're not ready to say like, this is how it works. But you could hand them a story, and then they can make meaning from that themselves. So I'm just seeing the benefits, and I hope that more stories are coming, Alex. I don't know whether that's on your radar, but I hope more stories are coming.
Oh yes, I have more brewing. I have a lot on the way for sure. There's going to be another book. There's going to be a magazine that because I want to expand not just my story. I want to help other people tell their stories, especially if they're not writers. So I want to interview people and then write kind of a third person narrative about them that might have a little bit of speculation just to like draw vivid scenes, but that is really grounded in the people's lives. So that way we also add to the canon of stories.
I love that.
I
That's
love it so much.
Thank you. Perfect.
Yay. Okay. So we clearly we could talk all day. We could just hang out, but we should probably wrap up. And I want everybody to know where to find you. Alex, would you just let everybody know where to find you, where to find Entwined?
Yes. So my website is alexalberto.com, and you can find just everything about me there. If you buy the book directly from my website, it's the way that supports me the most. But the book is also available on bookshop.org. You can also ask your local bookstore to carry it, which is also incredibly helpful, and it helps other people find it. And then, if you must, it's on the other big retail sites. It's basically anywhere you buy books. Also, if you enjoy my French Canadian accent, I do have an audiobook that I read myself. So if you're into audiobooks, that's an option. Ebook is also an option. And like you said at the beginning of the episode, I'm on Instagram and TikTok at that Alex Alberto. And I'm going to be launching Entwined Mag at entwinedmag.com, which is the magazine with more stories that I was just talking about. I'm trying to time it for the week of non-monogamy visibility, which is mid-June, but you can already go there and sign up. So if you want to be sure not to miss it,
Awesome.
you can
That's
go
great
there.
to hear.
That's fantastic. I believe actually this episode will come out. I think it's going to come out on the week of non-monogamy
Oh,
visibility.
there
So
you
I think
go.
that's where it's
So
scheduled
go
for.
sign up now.
So just go.
There it is. Just
Like
go.
run, don't walk. The link will be in the show notes. Alex, wow. Thank you so very, very, very much. I'm so grateful that you exist.
Yes.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so
This was
much.
such a great conversation. And I loved your perspective on the book and on everything else.
Thank you.
There's no one right way to design your relationship. And lots of people, actually about 25%, according to a recent national survey, are interested in some type of open relationship. But how do you know if you are ready to open up happily? Not everyone is, and that's no problem. I've got a 60-second quiz that will give you the answer. And even better, you'll walk away with your next step, whether you're good to go or not so much when it comes to opening up. And this is no BuzzFeed nonsense. I personally designed this quiz from my years of academic research. Go to joliequiz.com. That's JOLIQUIZ.com. And find out if you're ready to open up happily and what to do if you are or if you're not.